Welcome to PENSDOWN. This program is called PENSDOWN because the pen represents the journalists. But on this show, when we get a journalist as a guest, he or she drops the pen and becomes the newsmaker rather than the reporter or the presenter. Today, I have been joined by one of our colleagues. He is a media practitioner and policy analyst with a decade experience in policy, data, and investigative journalism. He co-founded iWatch Africa, where he currently works as Director of Policy and News. He is an alumnus of the Young Africa Leaders Initiative, YALI, the Thomson Reuters Foundation, the Commonwealth Youth Program, Free Press Unlimited, and the Bloomberg Data for Health Initiative. He is a 2020-2021 Policy Leader Fellow at the European University Institute in Florence, Italy, and a 2021-2022 Reuters Fellow at the University of Oxford, UK. He is a recipient of several reporting grants from organizations like the Podleser Center, Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, and the Africa-China Grants, among several others. He won the Best Reporter for ICT in West Africa last year, that is 2021, and was selected by the Thomson Reuters Foundation / Trust Conference as a 2022 change maker. Gideon Sarpong is my guest. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Right. Just a quick one. I read your piece on second-hand clothes from the United Kingdom, which is wreaking havoc in parts of Accra and Ghana for that matter. I am curious, are you against the use of second-hand materials?
No, I mean, so there are various categories when it comes to second-hand clothing. We are basically against worn-out clothing, which is repackaged as second-hand clothing and shipped into developing countries, mainly Ghana, Nigeria, and also parts of Eastern and Western Asia.
Yeah.
And mostly these worn-out clothing are garbage. So for a lot of European merchants, it's also a way of discarding their garbage. So that is what we are against. But then we are also against excessive fashion or fast fashion, where consumption or where production outweighs consumption, because inevitably then we would have a lot of clothing which would have to go waste.
Investigative journalists I liken them to the special forces in the army. The special forces are trained to go where the regular army cannot go, and they believe in fewer numbers, maximum impact. The same is with investigative journalists. They adopt a number of unconventional means sometimes to get information and expose people that are considered enemies of the system. Your work seems to have been littered with a lot of investigative reports. What have been some of the challenges you have faced in the line of duty?
So when it comes to resources to undertake my investigation, I don't think that has been a major challenge.
Okay.
But then the challenge when it comes to resources has to do with sometimes you want to pursue a certain story, but your funders may not be really interested in that. So that is a slight challenge when it comes to resources, but generally resources hasn't been a challenge. I would say that the most challenging part of being an investigative journalist in the developing country, or specifically, let me be specific about Ghana and sometimes in Nigeria, has to do with access to data, credible data and information. And a lot of public officials are also quite skeptical and very hesitant when they have to engage you. That has been it. Compared to doing investigative journalism in Europe, everything is documented. There's proper record keeping, so you can easily, and public officials are are willing and available to share government data. But here, although the RTI law was introduced 2 years ago, sometimes you request for information and it becomes a hassle. Yeah, so that's the most challenging. But then apart from that,
in terms of your personal safety, have you had any threats or dangers personally that you've grappled with in the line of duty?
No, I've not had threats which were directed to me physically in terms of physical harm, but then you always get legal threats as a result of some of the reports you do. Yes.
Does journalism pay?
It's a very difficult question, right? So I have a number of friends. Actually, I have a lot of journalist friends in Ghana. And the challenge is that it's not paying. That's the challenge. That's what a lot of my friends complain about. And they normally focus on local issues. I do a lot of cross-border and internationally related stories. And I would say that for me, I am paid well for what I do. So I can't complain. I can only be grateful that I am paid well, compensated appropriately for the kind of work I do. Yes. But then the distinction is that because I focus a lot more on cross-border issues, which is also internationally related, then I get to be paid international rates. But for local journalists here who have to rely on their employers, that becomes a difficulty. So yes, it is difficult for a lot of journalists locally who focus on local reportage. I would say that.
How did you discover the journalist in you?
So that's interesting, right? I think about a decade ago, I used to do more of advocacy and policy analysis. And I was out of the country, but then I was still engaged in that. I used to do a lot of opinion pieces. So I used to write a lot of opinion pieces, and that was how come my journalism career started. So with time, a particular news organization in Ghana decided to bring me on board to manage their news portal. So that was how it began. I was, let me say, drawn into journalism. I didn't set out to be an active journalist, but then I was drawn into it when I started doing a lot of opinion pieces about a number of issues, economic, socio-political, different issues. So eventually I was drawn into it, and that was how the journey began for me as a journalist.
Social media. These 10 years you have been here have seen some revolution at the behest of social media as far as journalism is concerned. How has social media redefined the frontiers of journalism?
So it's really broad. It's when it comes to the impact and also the negativity, it's very broad. But mostly now we have a lot more citizen journalists, and basically that's as a result of social media, where you have a lot of people, all they need is a camera, and they can really tell good stories. So in a way, it has broadened the scope of journalism. And in a way, it's also made everybody a watchdog in society. In the past, it was very limited to professionals, but now ordinary citizens are watchdogs, which is very good. Then it's also opened up revenue streams for a lot of very independent journalists who are able to monetize their social media platforms and make money off that. When we talk about audience reach as well, I mean, internet penetration in Ghana it's still on the rise. It's quite low compared to the developed countries or the global north. But then, although social media penetration is not so high, the audience reach for our reports has dramatically also increased as a result of social media. Now everybody can get an access to a news article on their phones. I mean, it wasn't so 2 decades ago. So these are some positives when it comes to social media. But then when you also look at the negativity, for example, a lot of newspapers, because of social media, they are dying out because people don't buy newspapers today. When you look at the survey, Oxford normally does survey, the Reuters Institute in Oxford. And young people, a lot of young people now access their news contents on their smartphones. They don't even watch television. So in that sense, for traditional newspaper organizations, if they don't pivot, then they die. That has been a significant impact. Then or you can also talk about advertising. Advertising revenue, which used to go to traditional media organizations, televisions, radio stations. Now a portion of their budgeting goes to social media. So these monies are going to tech giants, whereas in the past, it would have gone directly into the pockets of the various local and community media we have here in Ghana, which would have also meant that they would have made more money to compensate their employees handsomely. But that is not the case.
You said you do a lot more of cross-border reporting. That puts you in a position where you have to grapple with different kinds of nationalities sometimes, different cultures, how to navigate unknown terrains, even sometimes without a compass, although you may have a fixer or two to help you move around. What represents the most challenging assignment, if not only one set of assignments for you?
So when it comes to cross-border, I think security can sometimes be a significant challenge in terms of, so we did a report some time ago and it was focused on the Sahel region. And if you have to travel to the Sahel region, there are serious implications, especially in countries where jihadists and also militant groups are operating in certain areas. So security has been a concern when you have to do cross-border issues which are related to regions that are volatile. Then you have to also get a fixer. You have to get a local fixer, which is sometimes also challenging. But apart from that, the other challenging part of cross-border, because the nature of my cross-border is such that if I'm doing a cross-border and it borders on Cameroon, I try as much as possible, rather than going to Cameroon, work with somebody in Cameroon who really understands the issues and is very familiar with the terrain and who will be comfortable doing the reports because they understand the country and they understand what is happening. So that helps when it comes to the security. But then the challenge sometimes has to do with the editorial part of it. Now, when I'm doing cross-border, I am in charge of the editorial related to the region. For example, if I'm focused on Ghana and I'll be publishing in Ghana, I'm absolutely in charge of the editorial process. But I am not really in charge of the editorial process in other countries where I have partners. I may have contributed to the reporting and everything, but I don't have autonomy when it comes to the editorial process. And their editorial process may also go through certain steps which may differ from mine. So at times it drags. It takes a long time to be able to. So you can imagine if we are 4 people doing cross-border reporting and everybody has an editorial mechanism in place, and it takes a while for things to get done. So on a minimum, it takes about 4 months or 3 months to get a report done. So yes.
Okay.
But then it also contributes to the quality of the reporting at the end of the day.
You have done 10 years in journalism or 10 years reporting. If we are to roll back the hands of time, 12 years, are you still going to take the path of journalism?
Yes, I mean, I think for the first 10 years, it's been an amazing journey, right? So journalism has taken me to a lot of places. I've met a lot of people I wouldn't have ordinarily without journalism. So for the first 10 years, I'm happy I did this or I've done that and I'm doing it now. But I think that I will get to a point where I would need a new challenge. And although I love telling stories, I love accountability, the accountability part of storytelling. I like the impact. I may pivot because you can't be doing the same thing. I mean, that's for me. I wouldn't be able to be doing the same thing for a very long time. I would feel that I need a new challenge. What has kept me during this period is that whatever issue you are dealing with, whatever story you are telling is different from the last one. Yeah. So in a way, you don't feel that you are doing the same thing because there is always something new to it. Yes. But then in the next 10 years, hopefully I may pivot in a year or two, but then fall back on journalism when I have to.
You have already dealt with the question of social media, but this has just come to mind. Social media has created richer bloggers than richer journalists in Africa.
Yeah.
Where did journalists get it wrong? Were we sleeping? How did we miss the opportunity as professionally trained people who have the skill in using communication effectively? How did we miss out on bettering our economic fortunes with platforms as social media?
Interestingly, bloggers sometimes also describe themselves to be journalists, right? So we are all in the same space. But what I would say is that the intensity of the local journalism we have here meant that a lot of journalists lost track when it comes to deploying social media to advance their economic fortunes. We were so much focused on doing the job in the traditional sense, going out, telling the stories, coming on radio, reading the news, that we missed the monetizing part of social media. And basically, I think that is it. Journalists were so focused on the traditional aspect of storytelling that they missed out on the new technologies that were developing. So we had a lot of people who filled in citizen journalists. I think a lot of bloggers who describe themselves as citizen journalists. They filled in that particular gap. And I mean, fortunately for them, it also comes with a lot of money, a lot of good money, especially if you have really interesting content. But then I've realized that a lot of media houses and also journalists are pivoting and trying to deploy a lot more social media as part of their work, which is fine, which is good, because that is how you stay relevant. Young people are now on TikTok, on Instagram, and on YouTube. So if you really want the eyeballs, you must find a strategy and you must work within that space to even be able to make some money.
Some journalists have advanced the argument that ethical injunctions are also to blame for the trained journalists' inability to harness fully the potential of social media to their economic advantage, because for them, bloggers have no checks and balances. They sensationalize. Anything goes. And once they are getting the views, the eyeballs, and the numbers, to them, they are smiling to the bank. Do they have a point?
No, I mean, we don't. Because if bloggers are unethical or probably do not adhere to the strict principles of impartiality, accuracy, and all of that, you have an opportunity. The platform is also open to you. So if bloggers are not, you think bloggers are not doing the right thing, then why not exploit the gap? Why leave the gap for the bloggers? Why not engage? Yes. But when it comes to ethical considerations, I wouldn't put it like that. I know of a journalist. She lost her job because she was big on social media. And the media organization thought that she was taking eyeballs away from her regular job to her platform on social media. And they couldn't resolve it. And at the end of the day, she left.
Whoa.
So in a way, also, a lot of media houses, traditional media houses, have also stifled the growth when it comes to their employees, exploring other platforms to also advance and promote their brand as journalists.
Attrition in journalism. So many trained, qualified professionals are decamping into other areas, corporate communications, public relations, some of them into even farms or wherever they can find survival. What do you think is accounting for this state of affairs?
I think burnout. There is a point in when you are working in a very intense organization for a very long time, you get burnouts, then you leave. This year, two very close friends, one had to relocate to the US to spend about 6 months just to have a bit of renewed strength to come back to continue.
Wow.
The other resigned from the organization mainly because she had gotten to the point where she felt that she was just tired. And she didn't have a new job lined up for her, but then she quit. Yes. So I think burnout could be a factor. Then also the problem of remuneration. I mean, it's if it doesn't pay, then there is very little motivation. So when a bank organization comes and they are willing to pay twice or 3 times how much you are being paid for a communication role, a lot of people will go for that. A lot of people will go for that. Yeah.
Media houses keep springing up, and there are fingerprints of politicians and politically exposed persons all over them. The increasing political ownership of the media. Is trouble brewing? Do we have a reason to be worried?
Absolutely. We have, I mean, for me, that's one of my biggest challenges when it comes to political ownership of media houses in Ghana, because there is no accountability. I mean, we've had a lot of instances. We had a specific instance where a member of parliament who owned a particular media organization went there and exposed an investigative journalist. And there was no accountability.
Months later, he was murdered.
Yes, months later, he was murdered. So that goes to show the level of concern we should all have when it comes to political ownership of media organizations. And I would give you another instance. So there is a major media organization in Ghana, which of course we can't mention their name. And they censor what their employees can write about. Their employees cannot be critical of certain politically aligned groups because the owner is politically exposed. So if you write a story which is very critical of anybody who is aligned with a political party, there is likelihood that you'll be queried. There is likelihood that the report will not be published. There is likelihood that you may be a target for victimization, or probably a target to lose the job. So, and what I'm saying now, it's not as if this is not conjecture. I have people, because I'm in the space, I have people who work within these spaces, and they cannot publish certain kinds of reports. So that is really, really, really a major concern.
Let me buttress what you are saying.
Let
me buttress what you are saying with another one. There are also media houses whose staff are barred from unionizing. They cannot unionize to, champion their common welfare. In fact, anybody who looks like is capable of doing that is dealt with even before the person thinks it or communicates to the next person. This attitude in media houses, where as a journalist, I can call up the boss of a company and question him for maltreating his staff, but I sit down to be maltreated. What are we doing? Are we acting movie roles, or we are actually professionals?
That's an interesting one, right? So I was having the same conversation with friends who find themselves in politically exposed media organizations, and they were complaining to me that they couldn't write certain stories. They couldn't be really as vigorous and rigorous as they would like to be in their reporting. So I asked them, but if you cannot even talk about issues which affect you in your media organizations, at least there are a couple of independent newsrooms and organizations in Ghana. Why are you not anonymously talking to these people? Why are you not blowing the whistle? So sometimes I also struggle when it comes to how people, especially journalists, we tell stories, we tell underreported stories, we are the mouthpiece of the voiceless. But when it comes to issues affecting us, we cower. We become scared. I don't know. But then I think there are a lot of avenues you can expose some of these things. There are independent media organizations. There is the Fourth Estate, which is very independent because I know the guys who work there. And there are a number of newsrooms in Ghana that can objectively, neutrally look at the issues and put it out there, irrespective of whether the person is politically exposed or not. And that, in a way, you may not report it within your news media, but it can be out there. And that is, in a way, also holding persons into account. So that is the advice I have for colleagues out there who are silenced, who are going through a lot, but they cannot speak. They should find a way. We are journalists to get these to independent platforms that can speak on their behalf.
It appears the political and commercial interest in the work of the media seems to be holding journalists hostage. I'll give you an example. I hosted the former news editor of Adom FM, Samuel Nina Kudouna here. And he said in 2014 thereabout, when they were doing hot exposés on Jida and Suba and all those things, there was one day a GRA truck, a minivan, came to park in front of their office and started announcing that everybody who owes even a PESWA tax should prepare to pay. In fact, this is public because it's in the conversation I had with him. Immediately that announcement went out, his bosses came and said, this is the end to all those reports you are doing. The commercial interests in news production and journalism, how do journalists navigate?
That's a difficult one because the strategy for a lot of governments, for a lot of repressive governments, for governments who feel threatened when they are critically, when journalists are critical of what they do, one of the major tactics they use has to do with taxation. I mean, they really scrutinize you, and if you are found wanting, then there is a case against you, or that is used as a cudgel to actually silence you. I think that I am of the view that for places like Ghana, where we haven't lost hope in the rule of law, media houses who really want to operate as media houses, genuine media houses, and not as mouthpieces for political groups, should make sure their books are in order. Because if we have a functional rule of law in Ghana, then a government will fail if it wants to use tax revenue to silence you, or probably debt to silence you. But in the event that you're a media house and you owe the government in terms of tax revenue and you are so much in debt, that becomes a problem, because then you are politically exposed. And it is very difficult to really talk about this, because then the government's position will basically be that the tax officials are doing what they have to do. Although the government will be manipulating the system. Yes.
There is an ongoing debate on PENSDOWN here, this platform. Some are saying journalists should be licensed. Others say they shouldn't. What is your own take? Which side would you take? Should journalists be licensed?
That's really, I think that for the kind of democracy we have, for a very young democracy as ours, which is probably 20, almost 30 years when it comes to the Fourth Republic, we need a lot more people. We need a lot more people to be in journalism. We need a lot more citizen journalists. We need a lot more bloggers. And licensing journalists for now would restrict and cut down the inflow, I think, of people coming into the profession, which in a way would also not serve the country, because we have so many problems and we need a lot of active voices to really be engaged in most of the challenges we are facing. So if we really restrict it, that's really going to be a problem, because even in very advanced democracies, there has never been the issue of licensing journalists. And I think we need more journalists in Ghana. But then the concern with probably professionalism, that can be resolved through some of the programs we do in our organization, where mainly we train a lot of citizen journalists. So we in a year we train about 30 journalists who are mainly citizen journalists and having been taken through the regimentary requirements of how to operate as a professional journalist. We need more of that to really help other people operate in a more professional manner.
In Ghana, we call it Sole. Nigeria, it is called the brown envelope. Cameroon, they call it Gombo, or the brown envelope. In South Africa, it's unheard of. What's your take on this?
I think any journalist who believes that he's in to really make a difference shouldn't allow himself or herself to be bought so cheaply, or probably cheaping themselves. I mean, what is 500 Ghana cedis going to do to you that you have to be a PR, you have to be a PR mouth for an organization or an individual? Or what is 1,000 cedis going to do for you? So, I mean, it's wrong. It's wrong. There is no justification for it. You cannot justify it with the excuse that remuneration is bad in Ghana. No, you can't justify it. You don't have to do it. You focus on what you have to do. And I mean, there are three main areas: being a watchdog, being a gatekeeper, and being a mouthpiece for the voiceless. I think we should focus on these core issues and do the kind of work we have to do. Taking monies from people is not good. That is corruption.
Your golden moments these 10 years.
So for me, there wouldn't be a specific day where I'll say that was my golden moment. I mean, I've received a number of awards, which were significant. but the biggest point was when I transitioned, when I left mainstream media, to establish I Watch Africa.
Okay.
Together with my colleagues. I didn't know what the future held for me. I mean, I didn't know I personally, I didn't know what I was doing, but then together with my colleagues, we had to learn, we had to make mistakes. The transition, because I also consider the time I transitioned to be a very, very important one, because when I transitioned, the organization I worked with collapsed a year later. So it was really, really important that I transitioned before it collapsed.
Okay.
And if I'd stayed within the mainstream media, I would now be facing a lot of the problems a lot of my colleagues within the mainstream media face. Golden moments, I mean, apart from, so for me, that was big, and that is big whenever I look back. But then interesting moments where I was happy. I did a report a couple of years ago, I think 2 years ago. The EU responded and issued a yellow card to Ghana based off on the reports. A couple of years ago also, I did a report on some mining companies. The government responded. Those are proud moments. I do the work for impact. So I am happy when I see changes within as part of the work I do. So I am happy about that. I was happy when I had to be in Oxford. Also, that was an amazing moment. I was happy when I was selected as a change maker a couple of months ago. That's also been amazing. It was also amazing when I was in Italy, Florence, at the European University. So these are very interesting and appreciable moments for me.
Admission numbers into journalism institutions are going down, dwindling with speed. Indeed, I follow keenly the Facebook page of Ghana Institute of Journalism. And sometimes the numbers admitted for journalism courses is like a third of those going to do public relations. In other institutions, the picture is not different. Is this profession really suffocating under neglect, or people are gradually abandoning it? Is it losing its shine in Ghana?
So I have my own hypothesis when it comes to the dwindling numbers. I mean, of course, at I Watch Africa, we've also noticed the trend where whenever we put out a call for applicants, particularly when we are doing trainings on investigative journalism, we go out of our way to get women to be part of the training. Okay. We don't have a problem with the men applying, especially when it comes to the hardcore training programs, the illicit financial flow transaction, national organized crime, investigative stuff. And my hypothesis is that Ghanaians generally see what is happening to journalists, the abuse journalists often go through. They see how much the profession it's under-resourced, and they don't want to be a part of it. For the women journalists, I think the major problem also has to do with we see on social media how sometimes political groups throw journalists, women journalists, who see how people go after these women journalists. And I think that for a young graduate from senior high school, or probably in Legon, who may want to go into media, they look at, and I'll mention a name here because we've done some, we've published reports on them. So Sewa me here, yes. 2 years ago when we published a report on the number of abused journalists, she was in there. Nanama Anamwa was in there. Nanama Ajimaya Asante was in there. A lot of very prominent journalists, young women would look at, were in there. So if you see this vitriol, you see these insults, which is, I mean, we look at insults directed at male journalists and we look at insults or abuses directed at female journalists, and we realize that for female journalists, it's very raw. It goes to their sexuality, it goes to their relationship. It has nothing to do with their professional background. So I sit back as a young lady and I tell myself, I don't want to be part of that. Or I don't want to go into hardcore journalism. I'll rather do entertainment. I'll rather do the soft ones, right? So in a way, that has also been part of the problem. But generally, it's also under-resourced. So a lot of people would rather go in for where there is money.
You are Director of Policy and News for iWatch Africa. Give us a brief about your key focus areas as an organization.
There are a number of, we focus on around 5 main things. So we focus on digital rights.
Okay.
We focus on transnational organized crime. We focus on illicit financial flows. We focus on environmental reporting and human rights. Then we track government promises generally in Ghana. So these are the key areas we are operating within. Hopefully, as part of our plans for next year, we are going to start a fact-checking desk at iWatch Africa. But broadly, these are our main issues. These are our main issues also because these are issues that are not, that the mainstream media sometimes shy away from. Digital rights, a lot of mainstream media organizations do not cover that. Illicit financial flows, transnational organized crime, they don't do all of these things. So we fill in the gap.
I see. My final question. The issue of poor remuneration in the media. Is there any way out of this mess, or we are stuck here for life?
Wow, that's really a difficult one. That's really a difficult one.
Just give me an opinion.
Well, you know, when we talk about revenue models for media organizations, it's one of, I think, the most researched, or not even the most researched. It's one of the areas where a lot of people do a lot of research into, but then they come out and there's not a lot of concrete solutions proposed. I think we have to do something here. So when it comes to, you know, the challenge I have also is that the Ghana Revenue Authority, some time ago, I was doing a report on Facebook and Google and their impact on advertising revenue that would have gone to traditional media houses. I think that we must be creative, and we must, sometimes we must do the difficulty, and I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. In New Zealand and in Australia, there are discussions about taking a chunk of the money which tech multinationals are making, the billions, taking a part of it and giving it to developing a revenue distribution model for local news organizations.
Wow.
How this works is that Facebook, Google, once you put in something, they automatically generate your reports. So they make money off your reports. Now, if you are making money off news reports, then you must pay a fraction of the money you are making to news organizations. So in these countries, there's now legislation which will be directed at taxing these tech giants and redistributing the money to media, to their local media, because they realize that media is dying. And if they don't, because the money has been concentrated now in few major tech organizations, they are making billions, they don't pay taxes in Ghana. Facebook doesn't pay taxes in Ghana. Google doesn't pay taxes in Ghana. So, the challenge is that our revenue authorities, they are not even thinking about this. Government policy is not even directed at this. But then internationally, in France, also there are discussions about that. That, in a way, is also going to redistribute money from these tech multinationals to to independent media organizations. When it comes to broadly politically owned media houses or politically exposed media houses or media houses owned by political operators, for that, I really can't say much about them because it's a business they are running. They have to find a way to be sustainable. They have to find a way to make their employees happy. But when it comes to the independent organizations, I think that model probably could work. It's a difficult subject. It's a difficult subject, yes.
Jifa Bampo told me on this platform. Jifa Bampo told me on this platform that politicians set up media houses not to do business, but to control the narrative. Do you buy that into that?
Right. Which is true. Which is true. I mean, I agree. Because we see the business people who are running media organizations in Ghana, and we know that they are very business inclined.
Yeah.
And we also see political operators who are running media organizations, and we see that it's very politically aligned, and it's generating a certain politically aligned content all day long. So I agree with her. I agree with her. But one last point when it comes to revenue.
Okay.
The Guardian in the UK, their model is basically reader funded model. Where once you believe in the brand, once you believe that the reporting, you need such independent reporting, you pay money to support the organization. We've not gotten to that point in Ghana, but that is where we should all aim to get to, where citizens pay for the work we do and support it because they find it relevant, they find it informative, and they find it very helpful.
Is that the same as subscription, or that has a different name?
Yeah, subscription model, yes.
So that means in their own model, the news is actually what is for sale.
No. So the news is not for sale.
Okay.
You are supporting the organization because you believe that what they do really helps promote democracy in the country.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes.
Okay.
So I read a lot of stories from the Guardian, and they're always suggesting to me, because I read their stories constantly. It means I find their reporting to be useful. Why wouldn't I contribute $5 to help what they are doing? It makes sense.
Gideon Sarpong, Director, Policy and News, iWatch Africa. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you very much, Stephen, Jesse. It's been an interesting conversation for me, and I wish you all the best. Also.
Thank you very much. This has been PENSDOWN. Here we talk journalism journeys. All that the journalists go through that the news report don't allow them to insert. Because in news reporting, the journalist is an observer, not a participant. Here, they put down their pens and talk to us. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next time with another edition. Do stay tuned and be sure to subscribe. Bye for now.